All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Saturday, September 21st, and the Texas Longhorns are currently winning 51-3. And there's about 2 minutes remaining left in the game while we are recording this and giving you our immediate reaction to the Texas win over the UL Monroe Warhawks and Texas spanking that booty and general booty, that is. Jake, we have some thoughts. We have some just eagerness for the regular season to like actually start. I know this is technically the regular season. It feels like preseason games. It's just we're just ready for some solid competition and really see what this Texas team is completely and fully made out of. But yeah, really pleased with the overall performance. We're going to get into what our individual thoughts are on the Arch Manning performance in his debut start for the Texas Longhorns, the number one Texas Longhorns, and that ranking will not be changing after this week's performance. Jaydon Blue had a really big game. But some performers that maybe we wanted to see a little bit more out of in this game. And then also, we will look back at our predictions and see who our standout players were on Friday's episode and compare with how they did in tonight's game. So, Jake, let's go ahead, get your initial reaction. How are you feeling right now about this game?
Kind of like you said, I'm ready to see him play against some real football teams, especially for the defense. I'm ready to see them play against an offense that can challenge them by having both a passing attack and a rushing attack. I think Michigan is a decent rushing attack. We obviously saw them look better today against USC, but I'm just kind of ready to get into the meat of the schedule, get into OU and then Georgia, even Vandy, who took Missouri to double overtime today. And obviously A&M later in the schedule, a Kentucky team who fought well against Georgia. I'm just kind of ready to finally get into that meat of the SEC schedule. Cause it's hard to break down really too much. You kind of just have to nitpick, and there are things to nitpick from this game. I don't think the coaching staff was very happy at halftime. Once again, I thought the second quarter performance today was maybe the worst quarter of football of the season. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I thought it was very clunky. There were definitely some moments where an interception right there for the Texas Longhorns and Cole, nice. Trevion Cole got himself an interception. So, but yeah, I would say the second quarter was very clunky. Nothing looked very smooth. And I'll say this, I think Arch went through his progressions the way he was supposed to, but I think he stuck to his primary read. Does that make sense? I think he went through the progressions, but I think he stuck with the primary read kind of regardless. We saw multiple times, probably could have had 3 or 4 interceptions tonight if you're playing against a Georgia defense or an Oklahoma defense. Probably would have had 4, maybe even 5 picks. Threw into double, triple coverage multiple times. Relied a lot on the deep ball. And I think Sark needed to I had this conversation at halftime, and I thought that Sark's halftime interview going into the locker room was very good. And I think he's going to have to really be ultra critical of Arch's performance, not only to the media, but to the team as well, to just kind of emphasize, look, I don't care what the name on the back of your jersey is. If you don't play up to the standard that I've set at this program, it's unacceptable. It's not okay. It was a bad performance in the first half on certain reads, and you could tell Sark wasn't necessarily thrilled with the way Arch played and some of the decision making that he made. And I think that had a lot to do with the clunkiness. To go back to your question about the second quarter, I think a lot of it fell on Arch and even the defense. Jake, I know you wanted to talk a little bit more about the defense and the offense, or the defensive line in particular. But yeah, what was your kind of overall takeaway from it?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the defense played really well for maybe 85% of the game, but there was that one very long, I think it was about a 7-minute drive for Louisiana Monroe. Obviously, it didn't end in a touchdown, but the D-line was getting moved backwards, and it wasn't just second and third stringers in there. Collins was out there. Broughton was out there. They were mixing in a lot of different guys, but it wasn't because those guys aren't capable, because we saw them come out in the third quarter and they immediately dominated. And I think it's because
Right.
the staff probably got on them a little bit at halftime and was like, why are they running it for, 4 or 5 yards a pop for an entire drive and just moving it down the field? And then that kind of opened the passing game. And obviously when they've needed to, they've been able to tighten down, but it goes back to that. And we're going to talk about it throughout this whole season, the 60 minutes of hell. Whenever you're clearly not playing with the same level of intensity for a stretch in a quarter because you're up big, that's not 60 minutes of hell. That's taking off of the gas as a defense, and especially along the defensive line, those defensive tackles were kind of on skates for that one possession. And again, we're nitpicking, but it's kind of what you have to do, because at the end of the day, Texas did what we expected them to do, but I still don't think they did necessarily exactly what we wanted them to do. I think the first 2 games of the season I think there's a lot that you can coach from the UTSA game and this game that they're going to be preaching going into Mississippi State to open SEC play, and then especially during the bye week when you're going into OU and Georgia back to back.
Now, feel free to shut me down on this, Jake, and you're not going to hurt my feelings, but is it fair, as just kind of looking at it logically, and step away from being a fan, is it fair to say that the Longhorns, and is it okay for them to have taken a little bit of a step back following those first 2 games of the season, especially after a Michigan game, of like, all right, hey, we showed the country what we are capable of against a premier elite defense. Let's just coast through these next couple of weeks, get to conference play. And, I know that's not what Sark is preaching. I know that's not what he's preaching, but in a player's mind, you're going to handle business. You are handling business. And so when you are up 3, 4, 5 scores in a game and you let off the gas a little bit, is that fair to even, to be overly critical of a team that does that?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they're not professionals. They're college kids. I mean, it just happens. You get a lack
Yeah.
of focus for a little, and
Right.
you come out with all the intensity in the world. You get up 28-3, things kind of feel stagnant, and then you kind of just, the play on the field just naturally starts to come down. It may not even be something they're realizing is happening as they're playing, but it just happens. And I get it, and I know Sark doesn't like it, but we've seen them when they needed to perform for, basically 3 full quarters against Michigan. I think till you could for sure say, as a player on the field, that game was over. So it is fair. I don't know if fair is the word I would use, but it's
Yeah. What is,
understandable. It's
okay, I understand.
understandable is the word I would use.
Yeah, because
I get
I
how
would,
it's happening, and it doesn't necessarily. I don't have red flashing lights coming out of this
yeah,
game
I
or
don't
the
think it's an
UTSA
indication
game.
of sign. I don't think it's a sign of things to come by any means. Like, I don't think that they're going to have a lapse of concentration or intensity against an OU or a Georgia. I don't see that happening to a team like this. Go ahead. I know you want to say something.
If they have a close game, yeah, I don't think that's going to be an issue. And also, I think this is worth pointing out. They've gone very vanilla game plan wise these last 2 games, especially on defense. They're not sending any exotic blitzes. They're not showing any crazy fronts like they were against Michigan. Everything's very vanilla, because I'm sure even coming out of the Michigan game, I can almost guarantee you they have a lot still in the tank ready to go as a coaching staff. And for the players, they're probably ready to start unveiling some of that stuff and start showing what they can do. And we may not even see it next week. It's probably going to be fairly vanilla next week against Mississippi State too.
I think Mississippi State's going to be very similar to the last 2 weeks that we've watched. I'll be completely honest with you. I think it's going to be 40, 50 points to single digits. Like, I think Mississippi State is that bad of a football team right now. I don't think they're very good. And quite frankly, if Sark goes now, me personally, I think Quinn should play if he can play. I think he needs more game reps. He needs to knock a little bit of whatever rust he may or may not have off, get back into the game. He needs to get hit before the OU game is basically my thought process on that. I would like to see Quinn take a hit, get up, get ready to go for the next play, and really play well, even if it's just for a half. It doesn't have to be that long. I just want to see him get in the game. But if he's not ready and Sark is more comfortable going with an Arch Manning over Quinn to get him healthy, I think you can blow out Mississippi State and not really even think about it.
Yeah, and I agree with you on Quinn because you know, the OU game, it looks like it's going to be going final here in just a little bit. I think Tennessee's about to pretty much kneel the clock out.
The Texas
And they're
game
going to
has gone
win.
final, by the way. 51-3 is the final.
Yeah, and so it looks like Tennessee's going to win that ball game. But let me tell you, that OU defense is legit. And I would like Quinn to get some reps before seeing that OU defense because they fly to the ball and they hit hard and they play full 60-minute games, partially because they have to because the offense hasn't produced. Though it does look like they've maybe found their quarterback, and it is not Jackson Arnold. But you know, just on the defensive side of things, OU is going to be probably, I would say, as of right now, the best defense Texas might see on the year, even over Georgia. I'm that impressed with what I've seen from their defense, especially against the run. And I think I look forward to talking about what the game plan is going to be. And we're going to have a whole bye week to kind of talk about what we think Texas can do against OU.
We're going to have 2 straight weeks of Texas OU talk.
Yeah. The bye week works out perfect because I do have a lot of thoughts that I'm going to keep to myself for now about how I think Texas should attack this OU team and how I think Tennessee honestly had a very bad offensive game plan in this game. But we'll get to that next week. But back to the point at hand with Texas Monroe.
Yeah, well, and I think, you know, I want to talk a little bit about Arch. I don't want to bury the lead here. And I know everybody is going to have an opinion about how Arch played tonight. I thought Arch played like a redshirt freshman starting in his first collegiate game. That's what it was. Quinn Ewers, same thing. And I talked to you about it. I said, look, if you want to rewind the tape about 2 years ago when Quinn made his very first start at the University of Texas, Quinn went and threw a very bad incomplete pass on one of his first passing attempts. They ran the ball again, and then I think it was his second, maybe third passing attempt of his entire of that first drive of his entire career. Throws a really bad interception into like double, triple coverage. It was almost reminiscent of what Arch did. I'm not concerned with Arch. I do think he forced the ball a little bit to his primary read. He, again, you put trust in your playmakers. You say, hey, my wide receivers are better than your corners, which is true across the board for Texas. So I can't really fault him for doing that. But maybe relying and falling in love with the deep ball a little too much.
Definitely too much. I mean, he would sit back there sometimes, go through his reads, and then be like, screw it, someone's down there. And that's okay because you can see we kind of talked about this right before we went on air. This was the perfect game to me for Arch to have. You saw the flaws, you saw all the talent though, and you see that he still needs to be developed, and it shuts up. Not that there was any conversation with actual Texas fans, but the national media can shut up now and realize, okay, Quinn Ewers is really good at quarterback because he made it look routine every single game. And it didn't look quite as routine, especially, you know, Arch got off to kind of a hot start. And then he was, I think, after he started like 11 of 15 or something like that, he was 1 of 8 with 11 yards after that. And a lot of that was because he was chucking deep balls, but still.
Well, that and Texas went back-to-back 3-and-outs for the first time this season. And that was in that second quarter of play. And again, there were some parts to the offense whenever he's running the offense that look clunky. And I think to your point, it allows the nation, it allows the team, it allows the fan base to say, you know what, Quinn's the guy no matter what at this point. You know, there's really no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no question mark there. Quinn is the guy. He's going to stay the guy, and he should be the guy because he makes this offense look routine. He makes this very complicated, difficult offense to run, a very complex scheme, and he runs it very smoothly, and he runs it to perfection. And I don't think that can go understated because there's no reason in hell that Arch Manning should be 7th in favorite odds in the Heisman voting. There's no way. If you watched him tonight, you would know exactly what I'm talking about. Again, like you said, he displayed all the arm talent and all the things you want to see out of a prospect and out of a recruit like Arch. We saw glimpses of it. We saw certain plays of it. But again, missed Jaydon Blue just because he had a little bit too much intensity. I think the adrenaline was pumping a little bit. He had Jaydon Blue on a wheel route. I mean, wide open, missed him by like 2 or 3 yards. A couple of other plays too, where seemed to rush it, got a little happy feet. But then there was the play to Jonte Cook on the little quick slant route. Pump fakes, get the defender in the air, moves his feet just enough. Just he went from here to here, delivered a strike right over the middle into the number of Jonte Cook. I mean, there are points to his game that you see every bit of what you want to see, but there's also a lot of undisciplined, actions that he shows through his play that you're not going to have sustained success with, at least not this season. I have no issues and no, questions about Arch's ability in the future to lead this team to where we want to be with Arch, even a national championship. It's just Quinn's the guy this year. And like you said, it kind of was the perfect game to see that and to be like, all right, we've got our answer. We know what we've got now.
Yeah, and one other thing I would say about Arch and what I think we're going to see him get better at, and I think Sark now finally has, a full game of tape to show him, but he almost got a little too mechanical at points. He was in the pocket. He showed good pocket presence as far as being able to shuffle within the pocket, but he's athletic. I thought there was multiple times where pressure would come in on him, and he could just escape out of the pocket if he just trusted himself to get outside of the pocket just a little bit earlier. But I thought at times he was almost sticking in the pocket too long, which is kind of funny because that's almost the exact opposite of what Quinn's issue was early in his career, where he would get happy feet in the pocket, start to kind of shuffle out. I think Arch needs to look, when that pocket's starting to collapse a little, get outside of the pocket. He's pretty quick. Not just any defensive player is going to be able to run him down. And I didn't think he really looked for that on the standard dropbacks, which is kind of weird, as comfortable as he looks when he's on a designed rollout.
My only because my dad was talking about, well, why aren't we running the ball more? Why we're up by 28, we're up by 35. Why are we aren't running the ball more than why are we passing it so much? And a lot of that came in the second quarter when the offense was stalling and we were up. I think at the time it was 21-3, and I was like, Dad, we've got about 2 running backs that are healthy that are going to be like staples in the offense going forward. Like Sark can't afford to run these guys so much against a ULM. So yeah, he's kind of using the short passing game as an extension, something you and I talked about in yesterday's episode. But it's tough because I think Sark's put in a position now where if Arch goes down and he's running around and scrambling and takes one hit, maybe Sark is telling Arch, look, guy, don't run around too much. We can't risk getting you hurt. Stay in the pocket. Stay conservative with your scrambling. We know you can scramble. Just be conservative with it. Maybe that conversation was had. I have no idea. But, it's something that Sark has got to keep in the back of his mind with how these players have been dropping like flies in the last couple of weeks. And he's just trying to get them fully healthy after Mississippi State to the bye week.
But there's still points where I think he could have got outside the pocket and just thrown the ball away rather than he took a big shot and he would take a big shot and try to launch it deep, even though he knew a shot was coming. But these are all things that he's going to improve on. I mean, I guarantee you he's a lot better quarterback right now than he was at this point last year. We don't know a ton because we didn't get to see him last year until the Tech game, but still, we've talked about it, but it was just a perfect game for me because now there's no talk. Everyone knows Quinn's number one. Everyone knows Arch still has potential that's through the roof. He could probably start this year and they could probably win 9 to 10 games still with him. But I don't think they'd be a national title contender if Arch had to start the whole year. They're a national title contender with Quinn Ewers in there just because of how efficient he is running the offense. And you take that short to intermediate game for granted with him. But it's not just automatic like he makes it look. He makes it look easy. And now we kind of saw where, Arch maybe made some of the deep stuff look a little bit better at times, but that short to intermediate passing game wasn't as consistently there. And then on your point about running the ball, Jaydon Blue had like 19 carries at one point in the second quarter, which was honestly more than I was expecting. But with Wisner out tonight, like you said, you got two really, two running backs that are active, that are guys you're going to want to touch the ball down the, as you get
throughout
down
the whole
further
season.
in the stretch of the schedule. Thank you.
Mhm.
Lost my
Yeah.
words,
No, you're good.
but yeah, no. He's been very cautious with the running backs, and I'm sure we're going to see the running backs get more carry against OU and against Georgia and against, some of these tougher teams as the schedule gets on. We saw them get more carries against Michigan, but for Texas, part of the run game is those short little quick passes that we didn't see as much tonight of actually, but I'm sure we're going to see a lot, especially once Quinn gets back in.
Yeah, I wanted to go and talk about some of the predictions that we had of standout performers that we wanted to see for the Texas Longhorns. And I had an Arch Manning. We talked a little bit about Silas Bolden as well. Silas Bolden, I thought, had a very good game. It's crazy. The leading receiver for the Texas Longhorns in terms of receptions was number 11, Silas Bolden, with a whopping 3 receptions, 37 yards. The leading yards receiver was Isaiah Bond with 75 with a long of 56. Just insane. The amount of receivers that did touch it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 players with a reception tonight, and only 3 with multiple receptions. Arch spread the ball around. He finished 15 of 29, 258 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. And then Jaydon Blue, to your point, 25 carries, 124 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground. He also had that reception that ended in a touchdown as well, ending his night with 4 touchdowns. But Jake, I had kind of Arch Manning as my standout. You had a Ryan Wingo, 2 catches, 42 yards, and a touchdown. In terms of the offense and individual performers, obviously Jaydon Blue was kind of, the MVP of tonight on the offensive side of the ball. But anybody else kind of stand out to you?
I thought the offensive line in the third quarter, I thought they responded really well after probably having their worst quarter of the game. They got the ULM front moving like a dominant offensive line would in that third quarter, which you can say, well, that's what you expect. Well, in the second quarter, I didn't think they played very well, but then they dominated coming out in the third. Then Texas started to run the ball with a lot more success. I was texting you at halftime. I was like, I need to see more from this Texas run game, because we finally were seeing running backs get some carries in this game that we haven't seen in previous games, and there just wasn't much explosive, anything past 5 yards, first down runs, and then that changed in the third quarter. I'd still like to see, I think they showed the stat in the middle of the game. The longest run by a Texas running back so far is something like 24 yards, and that was 105th in the country. I'm not getting the exact stat right, but it was around that.
It was the longest run for the Texas running back was 23 yards. That is good for 111th in the country out of 134 teams.
Yeah, and part of that is they have not probably had as many runs to the running back as a bunch of teams in the FBS, but still, with this offensive line, you would expect them to have had an explosive run for 50 plus yards against one of these lesser opponents, obviously not against Michigan. And even tonight, still the longest run was 20. You got that, by 2 different players, and Jaydon Blue and Colin Page, who looked nice late in the fourth quarter. But
yeah,
that's something I'd like to see, and I think we'll have an eye on next week against Mississippi State, especially if all the backs are healthy and Sark wants to run it a little bit more. I think he's going to start to kind of press like, hey, we need to get something going in the run game, because if a team finds a way to, right now, if I was a team preparing for Texas, I'd have 2 or 3 safeties deep. I would try to take away, that intermediate to deep passing game and make you run the ball, because Texas hasn't shown that yet on offense.
At least not explosively. Now, I do think Texas has done a very good job, and I more so resort back to that Michigan game, because that's the game where Texas needed to assert themselves and close out a game. And Texas, yes, the running backs per se did not get a big run. We did get a big run out of a wide receiver in Ryan Wingo, a 55-yarder. However, I think Texas averaging 5, 6, 7 yards a carry in a drive in the third quarter is asserting yourself as a run team and showing that you are able to do it. Now they haven't needed to, nor have they really committed to a run game aside from tonight. Getting Jaydon Blue 25 carries for 134 yards and 3 touchdowns. If that doesn't assert you as a threat to run the ball, there's not really much more of a performance that will allow you to do that. Again, UL Monroe, I'd like to see it be done against, a quality opponent like an OU or something along those lines. But defensively, Jake, let's go ahead. Some standout performers. You called an Anthony Hill breakout, man, and talk about a heck of a performance. Whenever he did play, he was very impactful. He had 3 total tackles. He did have a sack. He had an interception return for 35 yards, almost a touchdown. But there was also a flag on that play that brought it back a little bit as well. But Anthony Hill's performance, Jake, I also think even a guy like Colin Simmons, who didn't stuff the stat sheet tonight, but just made his impact felt. And then I called an Alfred Collins with a tackle for loss there early in the game, one of the first drives of the game for the Warhawks, and 3 tackles total on the game. I just thought, a big performance there from some big uglies. Also a partially blocked kick. I thought Ethan Burke really got his paws in on this game in multiple ways, batting down some passes at the line of scrimmage, and then also that blocked field goal attempt.
Yeah, and how about Leona Lafau? He led the team in tackles, and he's a guy this year. Every time he's gotten, and I know the coaching staff's really high on him, and we've talked about how he's the first recruit for Texas football out of the state of Hawaii.
Yeah.
And every time he's in the game, he's around the ball. He's making plays. Obviously, he got the safety today. He led the team in tackles with 6. He had 3 solo tackles, a tackle for loss, and a sack, and obviously the safety. And every time he's been in this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's rotating in some of these games that are important down the stretch when you get into the OU and the Georgia. You can give Benda a rest if he's a little tired because those linebackers are fast and they're running sideline to sideline. Now I think that you probably got a third guy that you can rotate in there and be very confident that he's going to get the job done.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it with David Benda, and I think could Lafau start pushing for more reps, even if it's not just for rest, but just look, this is a third down pass rushing situation here. We need to make a play because I mentioned to you, he's kind of just that energizer. He does seem a little reckless. He does seem to kind of run sometimes with his head cut off, and he's just running. He's just sprinting out there, but a lot of the time, he's out there and he's just a missile launched from a cannon or something. And the dude is just everywhere. If he becomes a little bit more controlled and play recognition is starting to set in a little bit as the season progresses and he develops these traits, he's still a very young player. He's only a sophomore. Could you see him push for more PT just in money downs, like a third down passing situation? And they're like, all right, let's get a rotation here. And it doesn't have to be every single money down, but just to confuse the opposing quarterback a little bit more.
I would add him into that NASCAR package.
Yeah.
That we really haven't gotten to see much.
We haven't got to see a lot of it
because they've had all these games in hand, and Michigan wasn't really a threat passing the ball. So I don't think this Texas defense has shown very much of what they have up their sleeves yet. I think they're waiting until, I think once the OU game hits, regardless of how OU's offense has looked, they're going to be all hands on deck. You can't take OU for granted. They learned that last year, but throw Lafau out there when Colin Simmons is rushing the passer, Anthony Hill's rushing the passer. You have Trey Moore out there running the passer. Then you got Lafau out there and an Alfred Collins, a Vernon Broughton. I mean, you can have some crazy exotic blitz packages for third and 7 plus, 3rd and 5 plus, where you're not really worried about the other team running the ball and you're just like, let's get after the quarterback. I think that's where Texas is going to start to pile up sacks as the season goes along, is when they're able to get, these teams that they're not going to be trying to hide stuff against and it's 3rd and 7, 3rd and 10, and they're like, let's throw out this crazy blitz package with all this, crazy personnel out there and get after the quarterback.
I am listening to you, and I'm listening to every word you said. I know you're talking about blitz packages with the defense. Trust me, I hear you. I'm watching the Baylor-Colorado overtime game right now, and the Baylor running back just dove into the end zone, fumbled before he crossed the goal line, and Baylor's going to lose like that. Ball goes out of bounds, and now Colorado fans are rushing the field.
Oh, you can't rush the field for beating an
unranked
unranked
no.
Baylor.
It's a bad look. It's a bad look. But Colorado 38-31 over Baylor in overtime, and just an absolute dreadful way to lose this thing. Yeah, that ball's out before he crosses the goal line. Sorry, anyway, got to give live commentary there. But, Jake, that is 30 minutes here. And also want to give a quick shout-out to the volleyball team. Girls volleyball wins Friday night over Hawaii 3-1. And, Jake, it was back-to-back wins now for the week of in Texas volleyball. So getting back on track after a little bit of a couple speed bumps there a few weeks ago.
Against
and so
good teams.
Against good teams, a loss to Stanford, I don't think is anything to really hang your head about in volleyball. So, but yeah, just wanted to give them a shout out. Texas wins tonight, 51-3. Arch Manning gets his first career start and a big win in the process. Jaydon Blue, again, player of the game for the offense with 25 carries and 100, I believe it was 125 yards, 24 yards, 3 touchdowns. He also had a receiving touchdown in the mix as well. But Jake, that's going to do it. We will see everybody on Tuesday as Texas prepares for Mississippi State for their first SEC game of the season and of the Texas Longhorn program's history. And it should be another mollywhopping. We'll see if Texas gives them 60 minutes of hell. We're still waiting on that. But let's go ahead and wrap things up. For Jake Jimerson, I'm Tanner Carlson. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, welcome.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.